Don't look at me while I do this, goddammit. Here I come.
Sit back, it's time to get groovy. Question, do you remember that movie?
Bienvenue sur le podcast. Je suis le troisième Alejandro Rosa sur IMDb. And that, folks, is the last bit of French you will ever hear me say. And I apologize to our non-existent French listeners. That's right, I got that off of Google Translate. I listened to it 100 times, and then I said it wrong anyway. But who cares? Welcome to the podcast. I am the third Alejandro Rosa on IMDb, and I'm here with...
Steve Johnston, who is not on IMDb.
Still not on IMDb yet.
Nope, not yet.
Yet. And welcome. We are back, and we are going to the early 90s for this episode. We're going to, specifically, the end of 1993 for the film The Three Musketeers. This movie came out November 12th, 1993. It has a star-studded cast of some really hot actors at that time. Hot, I mean, they were all making movies. Everything was great. We have Kiefer Sutherland playing Athos, Charlie Sheen, Aramis, Oliver Platt as Porthos. We have Chris O'Donnell, very, very young Chris O'Donnell, playing our lovely D'Artagnan. Rebecca de Mornay playing Milady de Winter. But we also have Gabriel Anwar, who was also very big at that time. Tim Curry, of course, the amazing Tim Curry. Julie Delpy, who I believe is the only French actor in this movie that takes place in Paris. Michael Wincott.
There you go.
And Hugh O'Connor, who plays King Louis. I think I remember where I was in 1993 when this movie came out, but Stephen, what is your history with this film?
This is one of those films that I have to thank you because I finally got to watch it from start to finish. I remember it coming out. I did not watch it at the time. Did not see it in theaters. Did not seek it out in the video store afterwards. Really, I just remember two things from this movie. First was that following its release, the song got played at every single high school dance that I went to for the remainder of my high school years. And second was that it was a movie I always caught on TV whilst channel surfing, trying to find something to watch, and I always landed on the same two scenes. It was either dueling with the Cardinals guards where they first introduced themselves. You know, Kiefer Sutherland goes, "Oh, Athos, Porthos, Aramis, we all know each other. All right, now we fight." Or it was the scene where they're riding the horses away from a tower and they start getting shelled with cannonballs.
Both great scenes.
Both great scenes.
Yeah.
But those were the only two scenes I ever saw. And I never stuck around because I figured, I've come in halfway through. I'm missing something. We'll just, keep surfing, find something else to watch. So I finally got to see it from start to finish. Thank you.
Well. I have a slightly different story in reference to this film, which is that I'm pretty sure I did see it in theaters. I think I probably owned it after that in VHS or DVD or something, and I think I've watched this movie a lot. The reason that I know that is because even though I had not thought about this movie in years, when I started watching it, I remembered all the lines. I remembered the music. I remembered some of the plot. I mean, there were bits and pieces that I'd forgotten, but overall, it was like just all coming back to me, like I had sat there for hours of my life watching this film.
Nice.
And that was really cool. That was actually very shocking to me. And the moment the music starts, I was hooked. I was right back to the 90s, early 90s. We'll talk about everybody else, sure, directors, writers, and all that. But let's take a second where Michael came in, because he really, sent me back in time. I didn't know that he collaborated with Pink Floyd, that he actually was famous for arrangements. He did the arrangements for Queen's Who Wants to Live Forever, because he also composed the music for Highlander.
Oh, okay.
Mm-hmm. He has 80 film credits. as a composer and as a conductor, including, here's a little flashback for you, The Adventures of Baron Munchausen.
Excellent.
That's right. We bring it back, folks. We bring it back to the other episodes. He also did the music for Brazil, which I have not watched, but, Terry Gilliam.
Yes.
But yeah, so here's this movie based on the 1844 novel by Alexandre Dumas, directed by Stephen Herrick, who also directed Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure, not to mention The Mighty Ducks and Mr. Holland's Opus. It was written by David Lowery, who wrote Star Trek V, The Good Son, and Passenger 57. These are all 1990s movies except for Star Trek. Having not seen this film in years, if you said Three Musketeers, I remembered one line in particular. There were others that I'd forgotten, that I immediately, upon watching the film, but the one I always remembered because it stuck with me, because I didn't totally understand it, I think, and then it stuck with me forever, and then eventually I understood it. At some point, Tim Curry plays the evil Cardinal Richelieu. And, of course, Rebecca de Mornay plays Milady de Winter, another evil character. And they have a scene together. And in that scene, he kind of gets close to her in a kind of, I want to touch you sort of way. And makes sure that she remembers her place. And says, with a snap of my fingers, I could send you back to where you came from. And gets close to her. And at that point, she pulls out a knife and puts it on his groin and says, "And with a flick of my wrist, I could change your religion." I have never forgotten that line. Ever. And I loved hearing it again. I loved hearing it. This story is, anybody who's never heard of the Three Musketeers, this is the story of D'Artagnan. This is the story of D'Artagnan going to Paris to join the Musketeers. And in the process, he meets Athos, Porthos, and Aramis, all three famous Musketeers. This movie takes a lot of creative license with the story of the Three Musketeers. It is nowhere near what the book is. If you love the book, you probably didn't like this movie. And I think that was part of one of the problems that people had with it. The people who actually enjoyed the novel, or I think there's more than one book, but they probably watched this and went, this has nothing to do with the book. This movie starts out very heavy-handed from the beginning. It shows us the cardinal in a dungeon, and you're kind of pretty much told this is not a nice man. Somebody is like shackled and says, "Oh, Cardinal, please help me." And he goes, "Absolutely." And then he turns to his captain, Captain Rochefort, gives him a little nod, and Rochefort stabs the man. And there's a wonderful line, "One less mouth to feed." So we get it. This is the bad guy. Here we go.
In case you had any doubts.
Exactly. And everybody is set up in a very particular way. I have to say, the one thing that I love about this film, which still actually it isn't completely like the book, but it's still great, which is that D'Artagnan meets the Three Musketeers by essentially bumping into them or getting into a thing with them, which leads to him having to fight each of them in a duel. This happens in the book. This happens in the film. Humorously so in the film. Just absolutely fantastic. First, he bumps into Athos, and Athos speaks of manners. And so very quickly, our young D'Artagnan is like, "Okay, duel it is." And he says, "Okay, meet me at this time." Perfect. And then we're introduced to, I can't remember, I think it's Porthos, then Aramis.
Porthos, then Aramis, yes.
Porthos, the amazing Oliver Platt, who, again, D'Artagnan's being chased by someone else because it's insinuated that he was with his sister, so this guy and his friends and brothers are chasing after him, which allows for a lot of comic relief running around. And he runs into Porthos, while Porthos is, of course, usually holding court in some kind of pub or something. It has one of the beginning lines, just to tell you who Porthos is. He says, "Excuse me, this sash was a gift from the Queen of America." And D'Artagnan's like, "There's no Queen of America." And he says, "I beg to differ, infant." And immediately, of course, now we have a duel with them too. Then we cut to Aramis, who seems to be coaching a young lady in God,
Theology,
the Bible,
yes.
theology.
Yes.
And then, of course, her husband shows up. And then again, another one of those great lines: we need to pray for our sins. And the husband bursts through and tries to shoot at Aramis, and then Aramis immediately says, on second thought, "God's awfully busy," and then jumps out of the window. It's like, it's goofy, but it still works. It's so funny. This was the biggest surprise of this movie. I laughed so much throughout the course of this film because it's just funny. And of course, he lands on D'Artagnan. We must have a duel as well, etc., etc. And then we cut to the scene where we have the three characters of Athos, Porthos, and Aramis meeting with D'Artagnan, and Athos is first, and the first thing that Porthos says is,
"You can't duel this boy.
Why not?
I'm dueling him."
And D'Artagnan, to his credit, says, "No, like you're at noon, and you're at 1, and you're at 2." It's great, and it's funny, and this does happen in the book, and they're about to duel, and then the Cardinal's guards show up. Okay, I guess we should point out they've disbanded the Musketeers in the film. In the book, they don't do it, but they do it in the film. And so they've been looking for the last 3 Musketeers, which, of course, are Athos, Porthos, and Aramis. And we get the first of many awesome sword fights in this film. Now, I was pretty young. I really love sword fighting in movies. I love everything, Princess Bride is a perfect example. Sword fighting is awesome. And I think that's why I love this movie so much, because there was so much sword fighting. And it's great. And of course, we have, the Cardinal is trying to kill the king, and he's doing devious ways to do that. The 3 Musketeers end up trying to figure out what the plot is for the Cardinal that he's trying to do to get to the king. Milady de Winter's in there as well, because she's a spy. And there also happens to be the king, who doesn't play a very big role, except to look like a scared boy king. His wife, Queen Anne, looks like it's an arranged marriage, and she doesn't really do that much either, except wonder what the king's up to, because they don't spend any time together. We have Constance, who seems to be her lady in waiting, whose job is to fall in love with D'Artagnan, clearly. That is her job.
Yeah, that's it.
That's it. That's all. And we'll get to this. This is during our criticisms. We're gonna come back to that. But yeah, so this is the thing. This is the movie. They get into all kinds of fantastic adventures until, of course, they save the day in the end. There are some dramatic set piece moments, especially towards the end of the film when the Musketeers, all the other Musketeers, arrive to help to protect the king, which that's their main goal. The Musketeers are the king's guard. And so they all come back when they realize that the king is in danger. There is something so goofy about this film, and I cannot help but like it. I just do, and I see the shortcomings. But man, it was fun for me. What about you?
No, I completely agree. This is a movie that definitely has its faults, but I like it. It was such an enjoyable ride. This is, I think, the type of movie that, if it were a rainy Saturday afternoon, you'd put on, the kids would be engrossed in it, they'd love it, the adults would kind of, watch, but then, if they have to start dinner, they'd wander out for 5 minutes, take a phone call, come back, and you wouldn't necessarily miss anything important. It's just sort of a fun ride. Darn it, I said fun. I'm not supposed to say that anymore.
You're not?
No, I use it far too often. I need to come up with a different word.
Uh-oh.
But it's such an enjoyable romp that, I agree with you. It has issues, but this is one of those movies that I would absolutely watch again. I'd put on and watch it again without hesitation.
Yeah, it's funny. Before I watched the film, I decided to watch the trailer. Because number one, I love trailers. I've been addicted to trailers since I was a little kid. When YouTube appeared and you could watch trailers on YouTube, that was like the best thing that ever happened to me. I always got to the movie theater early so that I could watch every trailer.
Yep.
And also don't talk to me during the trailers because I'm paying attention to all the trailers. Because back then, back in like 1993, this was how I found out about new movies, right? The trailers. So be quiet. I still remember tearing up during the Forrest Gump trailer, which was a very specific type of trailer that was done with no dialogue. I think it was just music with a sequence of shots cut together that looked extremely moving. And I remember I was with my high school friend, and I swear I just teared up. And I was like, well, that looks pretty cool. But anyway, I watched the trailer for this, and I was like, oh my gosh, I remember all of that. And half the lines we quoted, they put in the trailer because they're just great. I mean, Charlie Sheen is hilarious as Aramis. Porthos, hilarious. Actually, I think Porthos, Oliver Platt, who I just adore as an actor, has some of the best lines in the entire movie. They put this in the trailer, and darn it, I watched it in the trailer, then I watched it in the film, and then I started laughing again. There's a carriage scene where they steal the cardinal's carriage, and they're racing off, and they're being chased, and Porthos is in the carriage, and it's like, oh, we found the cardinal's special stash of stuff, and it's like alcohol and whatever, and Kiefer Sutherland playing Athos is trying to actually drive the carriage, and Porthos comes out, and it's like, do you want some brandy? And he goes, Porthos, we're in the middle of a chase. And he goes, you're right. Something red. And then he turns to D'Artagnan and adds, you can't have any. You're too young. Now, we get odd things. Athos is our kind of, Kiefer always brings a certain level of gravitas to anything that he does. But they definitely gave him the brooding Athos. My wife actually watched half of this with me because she remembers this film and loved it very much when she was a kid. Her description of Athos was man tears. Just so many man tears. I felt that was a little rude, but there you go. I told her I would say it.
It's quite accurate, though, don't you think?
It is. It's the way that they wrote the character of Athos is just a little too heavy, He's the only one. He's the only one. He's in his own movie. He has a monologue that's about, love and loss while he's drinking heavily. And their whole thing is like, oh yeah, Athos takes his drinking very seriously. It's like, well, you guys should talk to him about that. That's actually a problem. And of course, this is all about his long-lost love, whatever, that he lost, which, spoiler alert, did I mention this book came out in 1844? We're allowed to do spoilers. It's Milady de Winter! She's his ex, which he thought was dead, but is not dead. I have to say, in retrospect, some of Tim Curry's lines are also a bit heavy-handed.
Oh, you think? I was going to ask you if you noticed the same thing I did with his lines, in that throughout the course of a scene, he would have some very eloquent Machiavellian-type dialogue and speeches that he gave, and then they always ended him with like a 3 to 4 word sentence that completely undermined the gravitas that he had laid down during the entire scene.
Yes.
The scene where he was attempting to seduce the queen. I'm paraphrasing here, obviously.
Oh, yes.
But I remember it being, yes, your majesty. People assume that just because I am a man of the cloth that I have cast aside my baser urges, but let me assure you, I have the same physical needs, wants, and desires. Yowza! That was basically the tone of his dialogue in that scene, and that was not the only one. There were several others where very eloquent speech, and then 3 to 4 words. Just did the writers run out of things for him to say?
I don't know.
Did they not know how to close?
Maybe some of the things that we liked about the movie, or I think some of the things that maybe are good about the movie are also bad about the movie, which is that they write one-liners. There's a lot of one-liners, right? At some point, the queen counters him about something, and I can't remember what it is, but his, that's when he yells, "That can be arranged."
Yes.
Right?
The what was it? He basically insinuates that she should be his queen, and she says something along the lines of,
Like,
"I'd rather die."
Yeah, there you go.
That can be arranged.
It's like, and it's good, but it's also kind of like, okay.
I have to say that one in particular gave me chills. I thought that
No,
was
that one
particularly
was,
well
yeah.
done.
That's a bad example because that was actually fantastic. And I actually remembered right before he said it, like in my brain, I was like, oh, I know what he's going to say next. And he delivers it so great.
The one that tripped me up a little bit was suddenly turning and going, one for all and all for me.
Yes, that looked like it should have been in the trailer, but not in the movie.
Yes, agreed.
Yeah, and then I have to say the Athos, Milady de Winter whole thing is just, there's a great scene that came off so melodramatic. They've caught her, and they're gonna,
Before you get to that scene, can we
go ahead.
just take a quick step back?
To what? We're gonna jump all over the place. To what?
But Athos has gone through and he's told his life story, pretending to tell the story of some count somewhere.
That's right.
And he mentions that
Spoiler
the
alert,
wife.
he was the count.
Yes,
because he was genuinely, I believe, the count. Yes.
The wife was discovered to have been branded with the fleur de lis, meaning she's a murderer and set to be executed or something like that.
Yes.
And then later on, D'Artagnan is with Lady de Winter, and they tussle, and it's discovered that, she bears the fleur de lis, and my reaction to seeing it was, oh, that's a good throwback. Oh, no. Because I knew that they were going to do she's his wife, isn't it?
There's only one person in town with that mark. And it's a fleur de lis. Do you know that they did use that at certain points in history? French history, yes.
Yeah.
Against criminals, some criminals. They also did it in slavery too. Mm-hmm. Apparently in Louisiana, some of the slaves who were caught doing certain crimes, actually got that as well.
So I apologize. So yes, we have found out rather melodramatically that she's her who was married to him.
Yes.
And now that's added a layer of
I will say, okay,
something.
Let's go to that for a second. So we're going to jump around the plot, folks, and we apologize. But D'Artagnan is our kind of sweet young guy who doesn't know any better, period. And we use him as a tool sometimes to get the story out. And in this case, he is traveling after the chase. He has to get information to whoever needs it, right? And he collapses because he's been traveling so long. And of course, coincidentally, Milady de Winter's carriage finds him on the road. And she and her two henchmen see him, and she's like, put him in my carriage. And this leads to a very odd scene with him waking up in her bed, shirtless. We will call it the scene we wanted to see Chris O'Donnell shirtless in, because that's clearly what they were doing. They wanted to make him, their little heartthrob. And he is so not great in that scene. I will have to say, all respect for Chris O'Donnell, but they nominated him for a Raspberry that year, which is an award for terrible performance. And I didn't think so at first, because I think he was so young and innocent, and the character was so young and innocent. But the more I've thought about it, the more I'm like, yeah, he's not great in this film, which just plays fine for the character. But yeah, so we have this scene in Milady de Winter's room, and all of it is just leading for them to tell us that she is Athos's ex. That's all. That's what it's for. That's the vehicle.
I kind of liked what I thought was the initial setup for that scene, where she knows who he is, in that he's a musketeer attempting to stop the spy from getting to England, but he doesn't know that she's the spy who he's after. And I liked the little bit of cat and mouse we got with that at the beginning, and then the romantic subplot came in. It's
yes.
like, oh, okay.
So
Never mind.
and this is sort of a point I was alluding to earlier, when she was caught, which of course she is caught by Athos when she tries to run away, they have this scene where she is in her jail cell, and they lit her in the kind of way they used to do with some of the older films, just the eyes.
Just the
where
eyes,
the light is only hitting her eyes, which was so weird to shoot that way, only because they hadn't been doing that for the rest of the film. Like, if you watch those old movies, they'll do it all the time. But this one, they just wanted to shoot her eyes, and I was like, okay, cinematographer, I don't know what you and the director were up about with this, but okay. And she has, to match Athos, you need someone to deliver an equally dramatic line. I have become the nightmare you thought me to be. That's the line she tells Athos, because he accused her, and the whole joke here is, not the joke, but the whole twist here is that she was innocent, but he banished her, or asked for her to be killed. I can't remember. And her comment was that, yes, she was going to die, and then the cardinal saved her, and then she went into his service as like a spy. And so she has become evil, even though she never was. And now he sees that. And it's like, okay, that's nice. Can we get back to the other stuff? Because the other stuff's really fun. This is kind of a little less fun. It's a little too heavy. And then she has they have a big confessional moment right before she's supposed to get executed, and then she jumps off a cliff. Which, even as a younger person, I was like, Jesus! Like, granted, I know that we were about to decapitate her, I'm pretty sure. But it was still like, oh, good Lord. She jumped off the damn cliff and she's dead. And then everyone goes, okay, back to the plot. As we said, this all leads to, at some point, the Musketeers being like, okay, enough is enough. We've just learned that the king is in danger. The cardinal is trying to kill the king. He's hired a sniper because muskets existed. So he's hired a sniper who's a very good shot. And they're going to have a birthday party. And then they're going to shoot the king. And the cardinal will become king. And he is trying to make an agreement with the Duke of
Buckingham
in England. So they can do this. And then, of course, this will surprise no one. The Musketeers come to the rescue. And in a very fun and dramatic way, they start sending out signs all over town. One for all for one and one for all. Letting the other Musketeers know, like, it's time. It's go time. Musketeers, assemble.
Did you find it as amusing as I did when we had the montage shot of the Musketeers preparing and they're cracking open barrels and pulling off stones from hidey holes where they've stashed extra swords and tabards just in case?
Just in case.
In case.
But we have to explain that. So if anybody who hasn't watched this film, when they disassemble the Musketeers, they have them say, the Musketeers are done, and there's a fire. And for some reason, they have them throw their garments, not all their garments, and we don't have like a whole group of naked men walking away from a fire, but they take off their musketeer top and throw it in the fire, and then take off their swords and throw it to the ground. Now, I also was confused about that because I'm like, really? Can't I just keep the sword? I kind of need a sword. It's the 1800s. But I guess because it had the symbol of the Musketeers, they had to drop them. So we just assume the Musketeers are gone. Now, Athos, Porthos, and Aramis, by the way, that's the 800th time I've said that during this podcast. They have not.
If only there was like a shorter phrase you could use to describe those three Musketeers.
I don't understand.
Yeah.
Yes. So, Athos, Porthos, and Aramis, they did not turn in their costumes, and they did not turn in their swords. They kept all their toys. But apparently, yes, as Steve has alluded to, when they send out the bat signal and saying, let's go, suddenly, yeah, it's a montage of people pulling out their extra swords and their extra capes that all have the Musketeer stuff on there. My favorite, which again goes to my wife, the not podcast-loving person who often says hilarious things. We are watching the Three Musketeers. Aha, I did it that one time. You know, the Three Musketeers, in case you're wondering. Athos, Aramis. Aramis? No, Aramis. See, this is what happens when I mess it up. I have to say it in an order. Athos, Porthos, and Aramis. When they get to the castle and they're having the big festivity, they have put on disguises. And by that, I mean they're wearing hoods. That's it. As my beautiful wife said, we have hoods on. They can't recognize us now. When, I'm going to do it again, Athos, Porthos, and Aramis take off their cloaks to reveal, ha-ha, it was us all along. And all the cardinal's guards against the three. And then all of a sudden you see all these other people like coming down and they're all hooded too. It's like, oh, who are these people? Who could they be? And then they all, uncloak themselves. And it's, of course, it's the entire army of Musketeers. And even though it's cliched, even though it's corny, I loved it. Because
it's great.
It's so great, right? And then, of course, we have a big, giant fight scene, right, between the Cardinal's folks and the Musketeers. And one of the things we do learn in the film is that Aramis was one of the Cardinal's students before he didn't like what he did. What he saw was clearly a problem, and he left. At some point, here's another one of those great lines that you're like, what are we doing with this cardinal, right? Aramis essentially corners the cardinal and says, you will face justice. And the cardinal is like, nope, not going to happen. And then Aramis says, then you will answer to God, while pointing a sword at him. And the cardinal says, you first, and shoots him. I laugh because it's so good and so funny and so cliched, but still good. Like, it comes back around to good. Like, it's a full circle. It's like, okay, this is kind of corny. Oh, come on now. We know he's not dead. It's Charlie Sheen. He just did Hot Shots. And then it comes right back to, he's alive again. Oh, that's great. Anyway, a great big giant fight scene. And of course, everyone be surprised, the Musketeers win. And D'Artagnan becomes a musketeer. I know. Sit down. That's what happened. I like this film. But there are problems here. There's a couple problems here.
I think the problem for me was that the movie did not commit one way or the other in terms of, are we going to have just a swashbuckling adventure in which these quippy one-liners are thrown off and there's sword fighting and, we're going to save the king. And this sort of melodramatic turn in the middle with Athos and his ex-wife. Again, when I realized what was going to be coming, I kind of cringed a little. And I thought to myself, okay, no, you could avoid this, because the whole thing is that they know, they get the note that she is carrying to Lord Buckingham. And it says, the cardinal is going to do a display of power or something along those lines. And the Musketeers are all scratching their heads going, well, what is this display of power that it refers to? And then the movie takes the direction of interrogating Lady de Winter and going down that route and navigating her little redemption arc and closing that chapter in Athos's story. And part of me was just thinking, no, surely these three musketeers who are sworn to protect the king could put their heads together and go, wait, it's the king's birthday in a couple of days. That must be it.
No.
And I think if they had done that, that would have, tilted the scales over to the swashbuckling side, and you'd have had sort of the jaunty adventure throughout, rather than let's slow the movie down in the middle for this one bit, and then we'll pick it back up again as we go to rescue the king.
Now, important to note is that Milady de Winter is in the book, and there is no redemption song for her. Bob Marley does not sing. She is mean. She is evil for real. There is no... one of the things that I read was that they made their relationship a little bit more kinder, softer. It wasn't that she was innocent and then became evil. It's like, no. In the book, she's like evil.
No, she was always
She's
evil.
actually one of the, if anything, she is a little bit more prominent as far as the evil person than the cardinal. They kind of switched the roles there a little bit. I'm always going to look at the role of women in these things. Milady de Winter could have been a big bad, villain, and instead they made her a less bad villain who was really just sad because of Athos. Very sad. Then you have Queen Anne, who's just wishing she could date her husband, and he's just not sure he's into that, but really it's just that he's nervous because he comes off as a boy king. And then you have Constance, who is, again, the only French actress in the film, who is just kind of there until she needs to, one, meet D'Artagnan, and then talk about D'Artagnan, and then throw a sword at D'Artagnan to help him not die. And that is the end of Constance.
Oh, no, you're forgetting. Then they snog in front of the king and the Musketeers at the end.
Oh, there you go. Sorry, I forgot about a kiss. We had to have that. The Constance is in the book. It's a little bit, her role is a little bit more complicated. And she dies. Milady de Winter kills her. Straight up kills her, poisons her. As revenge for something D'Artagnan did. She goes, you know what I'm going to do? Haha, I'm going to get you. So, yeah, okay. So, don't love that. One little tiny thing, not tiny. Let me correct that. One other thing in the, as far as the ugly category or the problematic category.
Is this the let us teach you how to wench scene?
Well, yes, that's on the list as well. We can go to the wench scene. Before that,
we don't have to. If you don't.
No, we have to. We have to do it. No, Milady de Winter has one of her henchmen is a sort of stereotype Asian man, and I say that because it's.
Oh yes,
it's
right.
a little. It's folks. It doesn't age well. It's a little cringy. Nothing against the actor, but they wrote him to just be a fighter and a gag at some point. And it's like, oh, that's not right. We didn't need that. We didn't need that. Or give the man some real lines. Come on. So that wasn't cool. Then we have, yes. So I'm sorry, I forgot about the one other group of women in this entire film. So let's review. We have Milady de Winter, evil but sad. We have Queen Anne, innocent and sad. We have Constance, sad. And now we have the barmaids. The barmaids, which is a whole scene which is funny and enjoyable as far as Oliver Platt and all of that, where they're trying to teach young D'Artagnan, he and Aramis, because, of course, Athos is in the corner, just weeping to himself into his alcohol and thinking about his ex-wife, talking to D'Artagnan about how he needs to learn essentially how to woo a barmaid. And we have several barmaids there who do nothing but giggle and kiss. And that's it. So, if you're looking for a film that has strong female characters with depth and such, this ain't it. No, sorry to say. Not good. Those I think are my main criticisms, right? It's we got the cliched stuff, we've got some heavy-handed stuff, and the role of women, and our one diversity casting that's not very good because it's a stereotype. Those are, I think, my biggest pet peeves with the film. But not to end on negatives, what was good about the film? What are the good things that they did?
I'm actually going to say that the cliche stuff works in the movie's favor. My criticism being that if you try to go back and forth between the cliche and the heavy-handed stuff, they don't mix. It's like oil and water. So if you just lean into the cliche, those are the fun parts of the movie.
They truly are. I agree.
Flaming carriage. Where's the flaming carriage going to go? Well, it's going to run into that other carriage. What's in that other carriage? Gunpowder, of course. Why wouldn't we?
That was so great. I had totally forgotten about that. They have somebody, they're setting the carriage on fire, and they're essentially rolling it down the hill towards the other, the Cardinal's Guard, and people are running, and somebody is running carrying a barrel. And then, of course, they fall, which makes the barrel break, and then gunpowder falls out next to what look like 4 identical barrels that are sitting on a cart. So you go, uh-oh, kaboom. And then, of course, 2 seconds later, kaboom.
Kaboom.
And you see it, and you know it's coming, and you're still like, this is going to be fun. They're going to blow some stuff up. You're right. I mean, I think you're right. The cliched stuff is good. It's fun. I did love that. I will say, I love the stunts in this movie. I loved the stunts, the sword fighting. It's super fun. It's swashbuckling, right? It's Douglas Fairbanks. It's Errol Flynn. It's all the good stuff. It's truly a fun ride. I thought the costumes were beautiful.
The costumes for the men, fantastic. With the exception of Lady de Winter, though, I think every other woman was dressed in kind of drab earth tones, weren't they?
Yeah, I guess.
Even the Queen was not exactly doled out in an elegant robe as I thought she might have been.
They didn't go as fancy with her, you're right. Yeah, that's true. Costumes were designed by John Molo, very famous for, actually, he won an Academy Award for Gandhi. He actually had, I think, he might have had a couple of Academy Awards, or at least a couple of nominations. And he was famous for doing the costumes for Star Wars: A New Hope and Empire Strikes Back, as well as the original Alien. So, love the costumes, love the stunts. The women, not so much, in general. No, wait, hang on. I mean, I don't mean that I didn't love the women. The women were great. They're great actresses. Jesus. Okay. Here's something weird. Let's talk about the making of this film for 2 seconds. Number one, everybody got to do sword fighting and horseback riding training for like 6 weeks before they started filming, with one exception. Charlie Sheen was still filming Hot Shots Part 2. So he was not available. He was making another movie.
Now, thinking back to the movie, does that show in the movie? Do we see less of him fighting than any of the others, or did he...
I think they edited it well enough that I never noticed. They do show him fighting, so I'm sure he got some training. But no, I don't notice it.
I say it did not stand out to me if that was the case.
But there's
so either
four
very
of
well
them,
done or...
Yeah. And there's usually 4 of them fighting, so they can just cut to him real quick and cut to the other ones. Here's weird. We're talking about a film about, of course, 3 Musketeers. There were 3 production companies who were trying to make a 3 Musketeers movie all at the same time. Disney, Walt Disney Pictures at that time, Columbia Pictures, and TriStar Pictures were all fighting to make a 3 Musketeers film. TriStar actually tried to get... Well, how does it go? I think Walt Disney Pictures got the writer, David Lowery. He had already been approached by one of the other studios to write their script. And then Disney came in and was like, oh, we'll give you $650,000. And he was like, okay, I'm going to write your script. Thank you. Yeah, they were fighting for how they were going to do it. And I think TriStar had a serious version of the film, right? A little bit closer to the book, more adult. And they had actually cast Johnny Depp in it in some form or another. And they actually had asked Oliver Platt to play Porthos. So, just very surreal. Like, yeah, and eventually the other 2 films would just fall off, and Disney would be the only one who did it. So, interesting casting-wise. There's a lot of actors that were talked about that to play parts, everything from Gary Oldman to other Gary Oldman actors. No, I can't remember. No, wait. Okay, there were other actors involved, but the ones that I do know, Brendan Fraser was actually the number 1 pick for D'Artagnan. No offense, Chris O'Donnell, but I think they wanted Brendan Fraser.
Oh, that would have been fun.
Yeah, absolutely. 2 people who said no to playing D'Artagnan, a very young Brad Pitt and Stephen Dorff. They declined. I know. What? They were all over the place at Disney. What are you people doing? Interesting. Winona Ryder was actually in the running to play Milady de Winter. And then she dropped out. Like, the casting process usually goes through many rounds and whatever. But somewhere in there, she was like, no, I'm not doing this. And I think it's probably because she went to go do The Age of Innocence, which ended up giving her an Academy Award or Academy Award nomination. I think it was a nomination. Maybe it was an award. Ooh. Oh, man. Thank God we're not a movie podcast that should know these things.
Oh, yeah.
No. Whew, that would be so embarrassing. Interesting. The film was a success in the sense that it made money. It had a $30 million budget. It made like $53 million, almost $54 million in the U.S., and then totally made $111 million. And I thought to myself, because we'll often do this, right? We'll see like, oh, was it a top grossing film? And then you realize what 1993 was. 1993 was the year of The Fugitive, The Firm, Mrs. Doubtfire, Sleepless in Seattle, and the number one movie at the box office, Jurassic Park. That broke incredible records. So no, Three Musketeers was like 25th, so not even close. In fact, Disney had two other movies that made more money than this one. Aladdin, which was probably their top-grossing film. Of course, it was their. We were in the 1990s animation town. Also great for Robin Williams, who had two of the top-performing movies. Mrs. Doubtfire and Aladdin, and Cool Runnings, which was a Walt Disney film, made more money than Three Musketeers. Like, it made a lot more money than Three Musketeers. I think it was like 9th. So yeah. Critics, like I said earlier, did not enjoy this film. They had a lot of negative things to say about this film. So number one, you have to take into account that Robin Hood, Prince of Thieves had been 2 years prior, which was probably why everyone was rushing. Because they were like, oh my God, people are into swashbuckling old tale. Well, let's find another one. Because look at how much money Prince of Thieves made. Let's make this. Let's hit this. And but what happened was that it was compared to that film in the sense that it was like, wait a minute. So you're just going to kind of do the same thing? Now, let's take into account both of these stories were written however many hundreds of years ago. But the critics' arguments about how they set these movies up. There was one critic who was like, okay, so we have the heroes, right? Like Robin Hood and the Merry Men. And you've got your villain, Alan Rickman, Tim Curry, same. And then, of course, the biggest criticism of all, Michael Wincott. Michael Wincott was in both. He was the right hand of the Sheriff of Nottingham. The one who says, why a spoon, cousin? It'll hurt more. That's him. I forget. I'm blanking on his name. It's going to come to me after we stop recording, but I remember his name. But yes, he was the side villain to the main villain in both films. And they're like, really? You couldn't even cast somebody new? So there was a lot of criticism about that. There was one reviewer who, or maybe more than one, they talked about the fact that it was the first time that Kiefer Sutherland and Charlie Sheen had been in a movie together since Young Guns. And they referred to this film as Young Blades.
Yeah.
It's just, ouch. Okay, we get it. And then, to end this romp, there is something else that they have in common. You alluded to it briefly, and now we shall go there. And by that I mean Bryan Adams.
Oh.
Bryan Adams, 2 years prior, was hired to write a song for the film Robin Hood, Prince of Thieves. Everything I do it for love. Correct? Yes. And it was a
Okay.
huge hit.
Yeah.
It was a
Yeah.
huge hit. It was on the radio all the time. We all danced to it. Slow songs awkwardly at school parties. And 2 years later, Walt Disney Pictures says, well, we need a hit song. And kind of like they did with our lovely actor, Michael Wincotted it. They said, hey, Bryan Adams, you want to make some more money? Do you want to write a song for us? And he goes, sure. What do you want to write? And so he and Michael Kamen and a third writer, who I'm blanking on right now, and I can't find in my notes, they wrote All for Love. All for Love. And the tagline of All for Love, all for one and all for love. It sounds like the song in Love Actually that the one singer adapts to add the word Christmas in it.
Yes.
It sounds so bad. So let me tell you my experience with this song. I knew this song. Well, I thought I knew this song pretty well. I have not heard this song since it was popular in the early 90s. At the end of the movie, they start playing it. And I say to my wife, hey, here it comes. And she's like, here, what comes? I said, the song. She's like, what are you talking about? Now, take into account, my wife and I are at different ages. So she saw it, like on DVD or VHS when she was a little kid, and I saw it in movie theaters. And so she had no idea about this song. And I said, you don't know? You don't know about All for Love? It's the Musketeers song. All for Love is a power ballad. It spent 3 weeks at number 1 on the Billboard charts. By the way, I read all these stats to my wife because she didn't believe me, because she hated the song. And she was like, what is this garbage? And I said, garbage? Girl, the country fell in love with this song. 3 weeks at number 1 on Billboard charts. 5 weeks at number 1 in Canada. And it was number 2 in England for some reason. You Brits.
Yeah.
But made a ton of money. A year later, there's a new version of it, 1994. And who's singing in it, other than Bryan Adams? Pavarotti, Andrea Bocelli, Nancy Gustafson, and Giorgia Todrani, with a full orchestra, which I think was conducted by Michael Kamen himself. Yeah. Follow up to 2007, Swedish trio EMD, some kind of Swedish band. I don't know them. I'm sorry, Swedish listeners. They released a cover, which was 6 weeks at number 1 in the Swedish charts. All for Love. And who sings in All for Love? This I'd forgotten, Stephen. This I'd forgotten. Because not only did Bryan and company, not only did 3 writers write this song, but they got 3 singers.
3 singers, yes.
Stephen, who sings? Who is the Porthos and Aramis to Bryan Adams's Athos?
Ooh, that's a good question. So you're saying that Bryan Adams is Athos?
I mean, only in the way that I can only apparently say those 3 names in that order.
Okay.
Not in a character way. Just as
Okay.
in
All
3
right.
Musketeers, they got 3 singers. Bryan Adams is of course one of them. Do you recall who the other 2 singers are? They're very famous people.
The other 2, if I'm recalling correctly, and I'm going to go based on physical build, we've got Rod Stewart playing the part of Porthos and Sting playing the part of Aramis, if memory serves.
That is 100% correct. They got Bryan Adams, Rod Stewart, and Sting to sing this song. And I want you to know that we were delayed in recording this episode, but what was not delayed was how long that song got stuck in my head since watching the darn movie. I mean, it's been there the whole time. The whole time. I could not get it out of my head. this was another one of those where the film was criticized by saying, this is a cash grab. You essentially made Disney, you made your own Prince of Thieves, and you even just went and got Bryan Adams to do another money-making song. Thank you so much. I think that I was at the perfect age to watch this film. It also appealed to all the things that I loved, right? I love the kind of romancy young man who's swashbuckling through the world. I mean, that was everything I wanted in life, right? And also, I had watched Prince of Thieves, and so I was a big fan of that. And so I was like, oh, this is just a continuation of that sort of thing, and I'm into it. So I was their target demographic, is what I'm saying. Watching it now, I still like it. And I don't know if I like it because of the nostalgia of the time period and how I felt about it then, or if I like it on its own merits now. I will say that I didn't think I would laugh as much as I did. So I did enjoy the comedy bits. What do you think?
I'm not sure I can agree with you that you watched it at the perfect age, because I didn't see it when I was that age. I saw it now when I'm older, and I still thoroughly enjoyed it. It was a very entertaining movie. Cliched at parts, got some issues, but overall, I really, really liked it. I think it holds up because in the grand scheme of things, it's very simple. There's no convoluted plot and trying to unravel weird conspiracies and who's evil, who is not. No, it's very straightforward. Evil's in red, good guys in blue. That's all you need to know. And there's some elegance in that simplicity. So I think it works great.
Yes. Taking into account its shortcomings, I mean, I really did enjoy the darn thing. I mean, that's clearly obvious by the amount of lack of criticisms I've had during this podcast as I just kept quoting it and gushing at how funny it was. So there you go, folks. The Three Musketeers. There are 1,000 different versions. There is a version with Gene Kelly. There is a version with Michael York. There's a version with John Wayne. There's all kinds of versions out there, and some people have their favorites. And for some people, this is not it. And that's fine. And there have been newer ones, too. They've done things since this film, of course. And there's even an animated one when they're all dogs. And it's like Dalmatian or something. And the Musketeers or something like that. It's terrible. But, there's any kind of version of this that you want to find. It's out there. And that's pretty cool. So find yours. Go look at yours. I think the earliest one is from like 1903. It's wild. We really love this story. And if you remember it...
I think...
What?
I think what we have learned here today is that there is a Three Musketeers for everyone. You just have to find yours.
He is right, folks. If you want to watch this particular one, go to Disney Plus. It's there. It's free if you already have a Disney Plus subscription. Disney Plus, not a sponsor, but we wouldn't say no. Anyway, thank you so much for listening to us again, or watching us if we ever get the video bit to work.
Not on this episode.
No, definitely on this episode. This is the perfect one. Camera stopped working. My camera just went out of focus for no reason. At some point, you just switched cameras. This is the perfect way to do video. This is what YouTube is dying for. They just don't know it yet. We're revolutionaries, folks. We're not afraid. Yeah. What, you want top 4K quality? We're not going to give it to you. No. We can't even get our cameras to stay working. That makes us original. We are like an instant Polaroid camera today. That's what we are. That's right. We're dated. There's not that many resources there, and it doesn't work all the time. But it's nice, I think. Anyway, thank you so much, folks. We will be back at some point, right?
Oh, yes.
And then Steven will have to decide. He'll have to decide what we watch next. We went to the 90s. Do you know what time period we're going to next?
Well, that depends, Alejandro. I have a question for you.
Boy.
I have a couple movies in mind.
You always do.
Are you in the mood for something silly and fun, or would you prefer something a bit more serious?
I'm never going to answer that question.
And I know, and I'm going to keep asking it.
You asked me last time and I didn't answer it. Why would I answer it now? You have to surprise me. I don't know. What do you want? Whatever you want to watch. I'm down with it.
Okay, well, in that case, I don't have the dice, but I do have a copper coin of the realm.
Oh.
So I'm going to flip and drop.
Thank you for keeping the quality of our programming where it needs to be.
Oh, okay. We are actually going to go 1 year forward.
Just 1994.
1994, yes. And we're going to go a bit darker here.
Okay, I'm ready.
We are going to visit the screen debut of Natalie Portman. So I invite you to join us as we take a look at 1994's action drama Leon, or Leon the Professional, or The Professional, depending on how you saw it titled at the time.
Or to my French friends, Leon.
Leon.
Oh my, that's right. She's tiny. She's tiny in that, right?
She is 12, I believe.
Ooh, I think I've seen it, but it has been so long that I don't know if I've seen it or if I've seen clips of it throughout the course of my life, because it's always right?
Gotcha.
And I love the actor, French actor, I believe.
Yes.
I love him in everything, including French kiss. Oh, Luc Toussaint. Anyway, the pilot says the one engine is not working, but we're going to take off anyway. I can't remember anything except lines that people have either said to me or that I've watched in movies. This is the only way my brain works. Yes, great film, very famous film. And again, I'm not 100% sure I've ever watched it. I think I've only watched things that have mentioned it and shown it, and I may have convinced myself that I watched it, when I don't think I have. You heard it here, folks. We are going to go back to The Professional, or going forward in time. Back to the future. No. We're going 1 week. No. Yeah, that'll work. Cue the music.
Sit back, it's time to get groovy. Question, do you remember that movie?